Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to talk about the controller saboteur. And every one of us has a little bit of controller saboteur in us. That's the part of us that doesn't want to be taken advantage of, that doesn't want somebody else pushing us around or controlling us, that kind of has a need for autonomy, that doesn't trust other people to do the right things and really doesn't want somebody else to get the upper hand. So we all have a little bit of that. Like, none of us want to be treated like robots and have somebody else completely control everything we do and not be free at all. So the controller is somebody who has this a little bit more to an extreme, kind of more dominating who they are, and a lot of their behavior is built around it. So let's talk about the controller saboteur. First, as I do in all these videos, I just want to acknowledge that the content that I'm going to go through was created by Shirzad Chamine, and it's part of our coaching program I'm going through this positive intelligence. It's part of his book, Positive Intelligence, and I'm in the process of getting certified in his program. All right, so the controller saboteur, we're going to talk about how that saboteur develops, the characteristics, the typical thoughts that someone with a controller saboteur might have, the feelings someone with a saboteur that's a controller might have, the justification lies. That's kind of what the saboteur tells you to preserve itself and make sure that it sticks around. And welcome to the new people that are coming. Please put yourself on mute and keep your video off while we're doing the video, because I'm going to be putting it on YouTube. So please put yourself on mute and keep your video off. Okay, and then we're going to talk about the impact on self and others and how to coach yourself to shift. All right, so let's start with how the controller saboteur develops. So people with the controller saboteur tend to be naturally confident and decisive and action oriented. And they tend to very naturally go after what they want. But at some point, they may have felt really controlled or shut down when they were younger. And that could have been because they had very controlling parents, or they were in an environment that really shut them down when they tried to express themselves. And while others may have just sort of accepted that control, these just felt such a drive, felt so suffocated by being controlled that they pushed through it and pushed back on it. The other thing that may happen is if they just really didn't trust the people that were in control. So if they came from households where parents were rather chaotic or not there, and they felt themselves kind of compelled to be put in that position, kind of like, if I don't take care of things, I don't trust that anybody else here will. So that could be a belief system that got created when they were young. So it developed into seeing controlling the situation or being in charge as the best way to not get taken advantage of and the best way to stay safe. So then what ends up happening is there's a lot of anxiety when you're not in control. And of course, as you know, none of us are in control most of the time. So that's sort of the conflict that the controller always has to be dealing with, or that the controller saboteur is always protecting us from. The characteristics of someone who has a controller saboteur is that they have very strong energy and they tend to need to control things and take charge. They like to connect with each other through competition, challenge, physicality, or conflict rather than softer emotions. So in general, well, this is a really important thing that distinguishes controllers from other people, in that a controller loves to debate or push back and really gets invigorated when someone's pushing back. And that is unusual. So most people who don't have a controller saboteur are actually kind of scared when someone gets that in their face. But someone with a controller saboteur actually gets energized when somebody gets in their face, and that they actually enjoy that. And that is how they tend to connect with others. They tend to be very willful, confrontational, a straight talker. They love pushing people beyond the comfort zone. Again, challenging other people is something that is really, really invigorating to them. I'm going to actually see if I can put my, oh, no, that doesn't work. So I just wanted to put my video on. So the rest of the people in, please make sure that your video is off, because we're going to put this on YouTube if we can. So again, the person with a controller saboteur is often stimulated and connects through conflict. So this is why often they will hurt others with what they say. And they will often be surprised that others are hurt. Okay, whoa, very fast going through here. All right, so they tend to intimidate others, and they have this in-your-face communication that's often interpreted by others as anger or criticism. So this is the big thing. I coach a lot of people who have controller as their saboteur. And usually they rise to leadership positions because they're so bold and action-oriented and results-driven. But they often the reason that I come to coaching with them is because someone on their team has quit, and maybe it's the second or third person, but one person finally wrote a letter to HR and said how horrible they were, how horribly mean they were, and how they bullied people. And this person is completely surprised by that. They're taken off guard. They're like, what? You know, if people were hurt by something I said, why wouldn't they just tell me? Because they so thrive on this direct interaction. And so they expect other people to be direct with them. And when they're not, they're completely bewildered by it. So part of the coaching for someone who has a strong controller is to really learn what their impact on other people is, and that it really does shut other people down and intimidate people and often hurt people. And that it's normal for people to not confront them back. So it is a little bit of a paradigm shift, but once they get it, they become incredible leaders. Okay, so typical thoughts if you have a controller saboteur is you're either in control or out of control. So I don't want to be the one that's out of control. So I'm going to make sure that I'm the one that's in control. If I work hard enough, I can and should control the situation so it goes my way. So there's this real sense of I control things. I remember having someone in one of my group coaching programs that was a business owner, and he was in an industry that, you know, really had some industry fluctuation going around. And whenever we talked about competition or the industry influences on his business, he would always state, I believe that I'm in control. I believe that I don't have any competition because I'm, you know, kind of singular. So he really operated his business as if, you know, the industry did not control his business and the industry did not sway his business. And that was a little bit of a blind spot because there were some major things that happened in his industry that did impact his business. And but he was still kind of taking all ownership for that. Like, if my business goes south, it's because of me, not the industry. If I succeed, it's because of me, not the industry. So there was a little bit of blindness there that ended up pulling the rug out from under him because he really wasn't acknowledging the factors that were outside of his control. Others want and need me to take control. I'm doing them a favor. So people who have the controller saboteur tend to fool themselves into thinking that everybody else wants them to tell them what to do, because they don't see proactiveness in others. When they see others not take initiative or not stand up for themselves or not challenge, they interpret that as weakness, and they interpret that as a desire to have a strong leader come in and control. And they also kind of have the stance of nobody tells me what to do. Okay, so that's the thoughts that typically go through the head of a controller, someone with a controller saboteur. Let's talk about the feelings. So controllers tend to experience a high degree of anxiety when things are not going their way. And they tend to feel very angry when others don't follow them. They come across as intimidating to others, although they're not aware that they're intimidating others. They just get frustrated. And you know, what I've seen mostly from my clients who have the controller saboteur is the feeling that they have is a high level of impatience. So they may not actually believe that they're anxious. They just get really impatient and angry. So impatient with others' feelings and different styles. Even though they tend to experience hurt and rejection, they may not admit it even to themselves. Okay. So justification lies are what the saboteur says when you begin to see it as a saboteur and think, maybe this is a saboteur. Maybe this isn't serving me. Maybe I should shift to sage. And the kinds of things that will be going through your head to sort of say, no, 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 you need me as a saboteur is, without me controlling things, you can't get much done. So if I don't step up to the plate, nothing's going to get done around here. And you keep justifying it. You keep seeing evidence over and over that people don't do things when you don't jump in and make them do things. You have this need to push people. And you really believe that if you don't push people, they won't do anything. And the other thing is if you don't control, someone else will control things. And that is the last thing you will not tolerate somebody else controlling you. And then you also often will fool yourself into thinking that if you don't get it done, if you get it done, everyone else will appreciate you for getting it done. And everyone else will appreciate you for jumping in and showing everybody how to do it. Okay, so, but the impact on the controller or the person who has the controller saboteur and on others around the controller, again, is often very surprising to the controller. So the person who has the controller saboteur, they tend to get temporary results because they so aggressively push for things to happen. But what they don't realize is people really resent being controlled. So they really they may do what they're told to do, but they do it because they have to, because they're being bullied into it, or they feel like they're being bullied in it, and they build up this huge amount of resentment. So because they don't have autonomy, they disengage, they protect themselves by disengaging. And then what ends up happening is they feel anxious, they try to get away. There may be high turnover in your department if you're a manager. But what you will get a lot of is passive aggressive pushback. So people can't match the aggression of a controller. So they often don't fight back aggressively. They often fight back passively by just disengaging. And so what ends up happening is people aren't inspired to do their best work for a controller. They go into autopilot and they just do what they have to do, and they drag their feet. And then, of course, the controller uses that as evidence that they need to be there controlling everything, but you end up getting a department that feels extremely disempowered, and you tend to get a lot of turnover. So if you have a controller saboteur, how do you coach yourself, or how do you shift yourself? So the first thing you really need to understand is that there's a difference between getting a short-term gain and really influencing people long-term. And the way to influence people long-term is to get them to buy in to doing something so that they're doing it on their own accord, to inspire them, to motivate them to want to do it. So they're doing it because they want to do it, not because you're forcing them to do it. And one thing that is a paradigm shift, but can really make a difference, is that true power comes from sage, not from saboteur. So a controller doesn't want to give up power, but when you begin to see the difference in power, when you really empower others and you can influence so many other people to do things, and you're really just kind of putting visions in their head and inspiring them, but you're stepping back and allowing them to tap into your own power, suddenly your power is multiplied, and you're not just dealing with your own energy until you're completely exhausted. Now you're able to leverage and guide everyone else's energy. And that is the shift that I normally notice makes the huge difference when I'm working with leaders who have a controller saboteur. Realize that the way you feel connected through challenge and debate is not the way other types feel connected. So this is another huge paradigm shift for someone who's a controller, because the best way that we learn how other people feel is to try to imagine ourselves in their shoes, and we imagine ourselves the way we would feel in their shoes. Well, the problem is that someone with a controller saboteur The way I would feel in the shoes of someone was challenging me is I would feel invigorated by that. I wouldn't feel intimidated by that. So it's really hard for me to get into the shoes of someone who feels intimidated by that. So that's a big stretch. But once someone with a controller saboteur begins to understand that other, and maybe even get a taste for some kind of experience of what is it to feel intimidated? What is it to feel intimidated and just, you know, backed down by what feels like a bully? And when do you want to escape and maybe flee instead of fight? If a controller can kind of get an experience of what that feels like, then they can begin to empathize and adjust their behavior. The other thing is vulnerability is a big yuck word to anyone who has the saboteur. They do not want to be vulnerable. They do not see vulnerability as anything other than a weakness. So it's really scary to think about the fact that there's actually power in vulnerability and there's intimacy and power in vulnerability. So one of the big internal journeys that takes a little longer is to recognize the power of vulnerability. And when I have seen people with the saboteur really see the courage involved and the braveness that you have to show some vulnerability, and they've tested it and they've actually seen how people respond to them, then they've made this other huge paradigm shift. And that's turned them from a bully into a really inspiring leader. So when people see these very courageous, strong people who are very naturally courageous and strong and brave show a little bit of sensitivity, and it doesn't mean they have to cry in front of others, but just kind of showing a little bit of their feelings by even sharing some of their feelings, all of a sudden people will follow them to the ends of the earth and back because people feel safe around them. But that missing component of also feeling cared for by them now fits in. So people with this saboteur have the potential to be the greatest leaders, but they cannot become the greatest leaders until they embrace enough vulnerability so that the people around them feel cared for, and until they pull back the reins enough to truly empower other people. Okay. A couple of other things: appreciate the importance of paying attention to and feeling one's emotions, understand the importance and value of grieving, and challenge yourself to redirect the controlling ambition to developing mastery over one's mind. So another thing that you can really do to inspire yourself if you have this saboteur is, again, challenge yourself to be brave, because that's something you're really good at, but be brave about looking inside and becoming really self-aware emotionally and experiencing some of your feelings and sharing some of your feelings, because that takes tons of courage. But when you see something that takes a lot of courage and you embrace it as something that takes a lot of courage, you tend to kind of step up to the plate pretty naturally. So that's a way to sort of leverage your natural strength to help you grow to the next level. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the video. For those of you that are listening to the video, you know that you can always reach out to me via email or whatever to ask any questions. But for those of you that are in the room, as soon as I stop the recording, you're welcome to turn your videos back on and your audios back on, and we will have a discussion. So here we go. Recording is going off. Bye-bye to all of you that are watching the video.